Right, well, welcome to this episode of InfoSec Real. This is a very special episode of InfoSec Real. I'm with my glorious co-host Ashley Pierre. Good evening, Ash.
Good evening.
And we are joined by a very special guest, Daniel Kelly. Daniel, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the show. We've got lots of stuff to talk about, and you sit in front of us with a very familiar profile picture because I've been almost obsessing over you for the past couple of weeks whilst we've been putting this conversation together in the calendar. So I appreciate your time and your energy this evening to talk to us. Dan, you're very familiar to me, you're very familiar to Ash, but maybe some people who live under a rock and have not listened to Darknet Diaries recently may not have heard of you. So in your own words, just give us a brief introduction as to what you're famous for, or maybe infamous for, in the cybersecurity community.
So I'm primarily known for the 2015 TalkTalk hack, where I think 5 people in total got arrested. And I was one of the main people behind that hack that ended up getting the biggest prison sentence out of all of that happened. Yeah.
Yeah. And 2015 feels like ancient history. It's quite a long time ago now. And if I remember rightly, the TalkTalk incident was probably one of the first big cybersecurity incidents to be publicised in the UK. Very well publicised in the media, big information commissioners fine for the business and stuff like that. So definitely an interesting hack for us to talk about, but obviously not your only, how I describe it, as maybe a touch point with the industry. You've got a lot of connection with cybersecurity on the good side, and also in your previous history, maybe on the bad side as well, which we are keen to get into. Maybe talk to us something I picked up on in the Darknet Diaries episode, or in fact, actually, I think you picked up on it first. Actually, was around how you kind of came connected to hacking, how you kind of developed that hacker mindset, and there was some conversation around Xbox, right, about hacking Xbox and all of that kind of good stuff.
So when I was I think it was 12 or 13, I used to play this online game called World of Warcraft. And World of Warcraft had a PvP system, and I used to play for 8 to 14 hours a day. And at one point I was obsessed with this game. That's all my life pretty much consisted of. But anyway, I played this game quite a lot, and I managed to get within the top 20 players on this game, globally. And this is out of 7 million players. And so what happens is at the high level, you go against the same teams. It's very compressed, right? So the top 20 players, for example, may go against the same 20 players for every single match. And one night I was queuing with a team, and before the match started, I ended up getting DDoS, and that is pretty much how I got started. So I went away knowing that I was being DDoS during these specific matches, and I started to do research, started to come across forums, and from there on, I started to get exposure to different cybersecurity topics and subjects, so web development, operating system fundamentals, programming languages, and that's pretty much where it started.
Did you? So let's say I am 15-year-old, 14-year-old me playing on my Xbox. What was it? Xbox 360? No, it would have been. What was one before the 360? The one that overheated all the time.
Probably just Xbox.
Was it just Xbox?
Yeah,
yeah, it was
probably.
just they're in the massive black Xbox. Yeah. And I was playing whatever game, and all of a sudden it cut out. I just wouldn't instantly think, "Oh my gosh, that's a denial of service attack." So how did you know what that was? Did you have some previous technical experience, or where did that knowledge come from?
Yeah, so it was it was complicated because it wasn't the first time that it happened. So basically, we'd play every single night, and one every time we kept going against this specific team, someone on my team would disconnect. Either it was me or someone else. But I initially thought, perhaps the opposite team's exploiting some in-game bug to make someone disconnect. But it became obvious that there was no in-game bugs for this specific game because it would, it had a good team of developers and everything. So I sort of what I did is I spoke to one of the members of the opposite team because we knew each other on Skype. And when I asked him what he was doing, he sort of he wouldn't give me an answer, right? So like he laughed and he didn't deny it or didn't accept anything. So I went onto the internet and like came across a certain forum. And I made like a thread on this forum explaining the situation and saying, look, I play this game. I'm being like, my internet's disconnecting every time I'm going against this specific team. How would you think, they're doing it? And that's where like people started to make suggestions. So like it probably is this, and there was a common theme. Like everyone was saying, he's probably DDoSing you. So that's where that initial thought came into it.
And was it something like they got your IP address from Skype or something? What was it? Can't
Yeah,
remember.
so like the chat program that everyone used to use was Skype. And so Skype was initially designed as a P2P or peer-to-peer program. So when you would call someone, like their IP address would be on your computer and your IP address would be on their computer. But you didn't have to like be connected to a call. So what would actually happen is you could make a call on Skype, like to a certain username. A call would be made to like, and this is probably too technical, by the way, but I'll explain it anyway. So a call would be made to this API, and the last known IP address of the certain like username that you called would be stored in like the debug files locally. So you could then go into like the local debug files and find the IP address of
That's
the account.
amazing, isn't it?
That's
Yeah.
cool. Mm.
You can think obviously, the gaming community want to DDoS the fuck out of each other for lulz, whatever, and get one over in a game. Fair enough, but also there's like serious privacy issue there.
Yeah.
Which I know. I mean, who uses Skype anymore? But and they probably fixed it, no doubt. But that's like pretty serious, isn't it? In terms of being able to track somebody's
Yeah.
potential location or thereabouts from an IP and stuff. I know that it seems that, and I know I'm such a huge fan of Dark Knight Diaries, and I was a huge fan of your episode as well that you did with Jack. And I think between Ash and I, we've listened to the whole catalogue multiple times of Dark Knight Diaries, and featured throughout so many episodes. And I know there was at least 2 episodes dedicated to Xbox hacking itself and stuff, but at least through the whole kind of fabric of people growing up in their bedrooms kind of hacking and stuff seems to be this kind of influx of people in the gaming community who develop some kind of hacking skills, whether that's to hack the gaming environment and to do what was happening, what you described there in terms of being able to influence the outcome of a game and stuff like that, or more nefarious stuff about reverse engineering, what ended up being breaking into Sony and getting source code for games and things like that. Why do you think the gaming culture kind of lends itself to people becoming hackers?
Yeah. So, like for me, it was that specific incident, right? But I think it's probably down to the fact that most people want to cheat on these games, like especially
Right.
young teenagers, right? Like when you play, for like over 8 hours a day or something, eventually it gets boring, and like, well, I would anyway, start to look for ways to like cheat and find ways to get to a higher rank in the game without having to like develop skill, I guess. So that may be it, I think.
Gone are the days where you get cheat codes and they go to
Yeah.
the corner store in the little booklets.
Yeah, I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was Bill Gates or someone that famously said, one of those big billionaires that famously said that you should always look to hire the lazy people, the people that are going to find cheats around systems effectively, because they're the ones that will come up with ingenious methods to circumnavigate particular problems. And it's probably the kind of mindset that people want to foster, that kind of hacker mindset. But you can take a fork in the road, can't you? You can use those skills for good, and you can use those skills for not so good. And I guess the world well, maybe way before 2015, but like when you were much younger, the world of cybersecurity and the opportunities to put those skills to good was probably a drop in the ocean compared to what it is now. I don't recall bug bounty communities being as vibrant as they are now. 10, 15 years ago. It's probably a lot easier to slip into a bad way than a good way.
Yeah, so like back then when I was doing things, like this whole infosec scene on like Twitter, that didn't exist, and I think a lot of people don't realize that. Like, a lot of bug bounty programs didn't exist. Like things like HackerOne and like Bugcrowd, they may have existed, but I never heard of them, and they weren't as like prominent as they are today. So there's definitely that as well. Like, there's been this huge transition in like, I think it's like the last 5 to 10 years, where every like this whole cybersecurity scene and like bug bounties has become a lot more prominent and popular, I guess.
Yeah, I think when certainly there seemed to be a massive ramp up the last few years when there was bug bounty millionaires being made. I think that got
Yeah.
likes of Doggy G and or Franz Rosen and people like that who are making serious coin out of HackerOne. That get noticed, and there's a few old schoolers in there that probably have done it for a while. But when those people who are big on Twitter and have got big social followings, and then all of a sudden they're earning huge amounts of money, it becomes a very attractive proposition for people, and people kind of follow that money. But um, yeah, it's a strange place, isn't it? Because like if you got those skills 10 years ago, 15 years ago, what have you? What do you kind of do with them? You still got to scratch an itch, haven't you? And it does seem to be a lot of people in that gaming community kind of go on. I don't know. Ash and I were talking off air about the likes of Malware Tech Blog, Marcus Hutchins, and I think probably shared a similar kind of backstory in terms of being in it, being a gamer or a coder, and being in that kind of era as well, I guess.
Do you think like the ice almost like the, and it's a weird thing to say, but the isolation and the community around gaming are very similar to like the dark side of infosec. So
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, for sure. Because like, the same, I think people in those like industries or scenes or like spaces have similar personality traits, right? Like
mm,
you're isolated. It's all in the same environment. Like, you're in your house, in front of a computer screen for like extended periods of time.
yeah.
So it definitely like breeds the same type of people. So there's definitely like
Mm.
association there, I think.
So talking about like the isolation side of things, and in one of your interviews you talked about in one of your previous interviews you talked about your hatred of school. I just
Mm.
like to explore it a little bit more. Like, so what did you hate about your early life formal education?
So I just hated the social aspect of it, but
Mm,
like I've always been like that. So I've always been different from like other people. Like, I've never really like fitted in. Like in school, I'd spend like extensive time on my own, and I'd have like one or two friends, and I lived like more of my life was lived outside of school as opposed to in it. For like most young like teenagers, they have a group of friends in school, they come home, they socialize. Like for me, it wasn't like that. I just used to go to school because I had to go to school, and then I'd come home and sort of use like the internet and like my computer as a way to escape from like the social aspect that come with things. I've always been someone that has like enjoyed spending time on my own and like doing my own type of thing. But that's changed recently because of the experience that I've been through. Like, I didn't have much of a choice, obviously, but, yeah.
Do you think as well some of that kind of isolation and that way of life comes from like physically where you live, where you're geolocated? I mean, um, it's where you're from in Wales is not like
Yeah.
central London where you're surrounded by whatever hobby and opportunity that you want to go and explore, and it's busy and there's people everywhere, and you kind of have to mingle.
Yeah, yeah, like for sure, because this is like where I live is nothing like a city. Like, there's literally nothing to do. Like, is has a very like small population, and even if I wasn't like even if I didn't spend my time in front of a computer, right, I don't really know what else I would have been doing anyway. Like, there wasn't like activities or anything to do like that you would find in bigger places. So that probably did contribute to it as well.
Hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? I wonder. I've never seen a study, but I wonder what the kind of percentage is of people who live in kind of lower economic regions around the UK, for example, are associated to cybercrime as opposed to people who live in what would be described as probably wealthier areas. It'd be a fascinating study to have a look at, but no doubt there'll be some kind of contribution to that mentality. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And then so you went on to start around. So we got the gaming side of things, and then you spoke about the college in your Darknet Diaries episode as well, about DDoS in the college network, which had some other ramifications. But what can you describe that? What kind of stuff did you get up to there? What was it like?
So the college DDoS was one of the first things that I was arrested for. But like it started, it's gonna sound stupid, but back then I was like 15, so I had the logic of a 15-year-old teenager. Like I didn't like doing. So part of this college course that I did involved giving presentations and like speaking in front of people, like public speaking, right? And I really, really didn't like it, but you had to do it to pass the course. So what I did is like basically start DDoSing the college, and in exchange, like nobody would have to do the presentations, and then that would be a valid reason to carry on with the course and pass, right? Obviously, it had bigger ramifications, but what I had, so I back then I knew someone that I had met on a forum, and they gave me access to this like Mirai botnet, which had like I think it was 10,000 bots, something ridiculous. And all that I was doing was like pointing this huge botnet at my local college, and like the entire network was being like null routed. Like, problem is though that network hosted a lot more than just my local college. Like there was
Janet.
police stations, Janet basically. There was like pretty big, like half of Wales really was kind of hosted on this, right? But I didn't know at the time. I just thought it was just my local college. I didn't know there was police stations and things. So yeah, that definitely like that came back to bite me. But
I know Janet well. It's one of the networks I built in one of my previous roles.
Really?
Yeah. The Janet network was it was an interesting bit of architecture, but yeah. So I guess that's if it was one of the like a local academy who just had an internet connection to the outside world, they probably would have gotten a notice. They might have whinged to their ISP and complained, and working in ISPs would have done it. We wouldn't have done anything about it. We said, oh well, we protect our network. So if your DDoS stack is like 2 terabytes, then we'll do something. But they probably wouldn't have got a notice. I think that was the one thing that you're DDoSing like a public sector, a PSN network, which has lots of people on it, and it has a big team behind.
Would you expect a network like that though to be more well protected against something which is what I would describe as probably a fairly trivial attack vector in DDoS? Just kind of throwing a load of packets at a firewall. If you're running a government network, you would expect them to have some kind of capability to defend against this kind of attack. No.
The problem is it's like a central point of failure, because if you can just hit this one network off and everything like goes down, then it's obviously not like a good design. But the thing is, like, when I was like, I look back at what I was doing, and what I did could have been prevented in like 10 seconds without any money being invested. So all that I was doing was like taking like the web server's IP address, like the public IP address that hosts the website. I was just putting it into this botnet, and I was just flooding the network. So if someone had come along and like put, I don't know, that IP address behind like Cloudflare or something, or like I don't know, like a commercial firewall, if they had like put a proxy in front of it, I wouldn't have had the technical knowledge to actually go and get the IP address to like bypass Cloudflare. So there were ways, like what I did, even though it was labeled by the media like sophisticated and like organized, like trust me, it was literally the work of a 14-year-old kid. So there were ways to like,
but it's like, in modern infosec world now, that I guess the analogy, this is actually not an analogy, so forgive me, but we don't rely on employees as being security controls, right? We just go with the approach of the employee's going to click the fucking link, they're going to open the attachment, they're going to run some malware. You've got to defend against that. You've got to, include that in your threat model. The same way as like, the reality is, as you say, what you did is literally put an IP address in a tool
Yeah.
which just directed some traffic towards it. There's nothing to say that couldn't have been like a busy day on the network, and loads of people could have just like randomly visited these websites and kind of taken it down through that kind of exhaustion. The reality is, what you did, yes, there was some intent there behind the action, but surely the security control should have actually allowed for that that kind of vector. And it's not all necessarily on you. There's almost some kind of like, I'm going to use the word negligence, but it's not. There's almost like you're highlighting an area there where they've clearly not thought about security well enough, the fundamentals of security. And the most basic form of attack has allowed all of these networks to get taken down. It can't be your fault. It's got to be. They've got to take some liability there, surely.
Yeah, like that's the thing, right? Obviously, I shouldn't have done what I did, but at the same time, I think the bigger problem is a 14-year-old child being able to do that to your
Yeah.
network, as opposed to the 14-year-old actually doing it. Like, it shouldn't be able to do it in the first place, because it honestly wasn't sophisticated. It wasn't organized, and it wasn't any of the things that it was
Yes, it's not
labeled. It
North
was
Korea, is it?
no,
Yeah,
like, no.
Let me touch on something
Yeah.
though. I'll be honest with you. Without handing some money over or some Ethereum, no one's just going to hand me a botnet. So like, without
Yeah.
exposing yourself too much, like talk a little bit about that. Like how was you handed a botnet of 10,000? Like that's a big machine.
So this was when like Mirai first come out, and all that
Mhm.
you had was like IoT devices. It was just this huge botnet that consisted of like IoT devices, so like routers and like things with default credentials. And
Yeah.
there was about 10,000 devices. And by that point, I had associated myself with certain people on forums. Like I was on forums, typing to people for like 8 to 10 hours a day. And like, even though they weren't my friends, I was still associating with them. And I guess like a level of trust was built. And this, like, there were the two people that I used to type to, and I guess they just sort of trusted me to do like whatever with it, because it wasn't like that botnet, from my understanding, wasn't built out of like 0 days. It was built out of like public exploits and like IoT devices with default credentials. So even though it sounds impressive,
Hmm.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think it actually was. Yeah.
I still think it's difficult for someone to say, "Oh yeah, can I have your botnet please for no money?" I think now people have got a bit wise, and maybe for maybe for 0.5 of a Bitcoin, yeah, you can rent it for a couple of hours. But how did you how did you get down this rabbit hole though of knowing these? Like, were you already doing some hacking before you got to this point? Did you have to prove yourself in any way?
So there was like a period of time, and so after I basically cheated on that game, right? Like, I
Yeah.
eventually quit. Like, I stopped playing the game because it got boring to me, because it was like no longer about skill. It was like about cheating, and it's not exactly the best thing in the world. So I quit that game and basically went back to these forums where all of these like different like this all this different material was being posted. So like things to do with web development, programming. And what I did is, like, I spend months at a time looking at different areas of what's now known as cybersecurity. So like I spend 3 months on web development, like learning HTML, PHP. I'd spend like 3 months on programming languages, and that's what I did for the best part of a year or two. And I spoke about this in Darknet Diaries, but basically I started taking what I had learned and methodology that was like posted on this forum, and I started applying it to like real websites. And one of the websites that I found like a really low end vulnerability on was a subdomain belonging to Microsoft. So so back then, Microsoft were running like this independent bug bounty program. I reported, so it was a cross-site scripting vulnerability. It's like nothing major. So I like reported this vulnerability to Microsoft. But I continued, so they listed like my name on their Hall of Fame. I then continued doing the same like thing. So I kept looking for vulnerabilities in loads of different websites, kept reporting them, right? Because I started off with good intent. Like I didn't start off with malicious intent. So I kept reporting these vulnerabilities. And none of these websites like ever gave me like a response really. Like I'd report them, they wouldn't like they wouldn't do anything about the vulnerabilities basically. So by going back to these forums, there were people on there that weren't exactly as ethical as me at that point in time. Like there was criminals on there, right? They were sharing methodology to engage in illicit computer hacking, not necessarily ethical computer hacking. Well, I studied like I started posting on threads. I studied like private messaging users, and eventually I just started to like associate with criminals in a sense. But I wasn't like criminally minded back then. And I guess they had like an influence on me, and that's how I like started getting involved in people that are with people that access to like botnets, and loads of different things. So, yeah.
Do you feel like they groomed you?
I wouldn't use the word groomed because like I inevitably made a decision to like do that type of thing, but they definitely like influenced me, because if it wasn't for them I wouldn't have like thought of doing that type of thing.
Okay. I mean, you're definitely pretty young. You're below 18, technically legally a child at the time. It's just interesting to see how you got down this path. And how how you took your interest in the forum and what was being posted and started practically applying it, which is a good, if you look at it, it's actually a good trait to have. You take an interest and a passion and see how does it practically work in the real world.
I think that the difference is though, back then like cybersecurity sucked. Like it was way worse in contrast to how it is today. Like today there's way more of like an awareness about different like best practices and stuff, but back then you could find like really basic OWASP vulnerabilities on like home pages and like root domains. Like you could find like error-based SQL injections on like huge companies home pages. So it was it's a very different place back then, like in contrast to today. So yeah.
Do you think what you did then, and the kind of the enterprise that you were involved in with respect to TalkTalk and the other kind of stuff that you've spoken about, do you think that you kind of kick-started because of the media interest in you and especially the TalkTalk hack? Do you think that really put kind of cybersecurity on the map a bit more within the industry in the UK?
So it definitely contributed to it, because like the media coverage with TalkTalk was absolutely like ridiculous. Like I had, so when I was initially arrested, I had like every single national newspaper outside my house. Like I'm sure I even had international reporters outside my house. They even set up camps. Like I couldn't leave my house. Like they were just like there for days, just waiting for me to come out. So there was a huge media interest, and it probably did contribute to like the awareness that now exists today. But I don't know. I don't know if I would. Like, I don't. It's difficult to say how much it like contributed.
It'd be fascinating. I mean, many people on this podcast listening will know that Ashley and I have got affiliation with TalkTalk. I used to work for them directly, and Ashley used to work for a reseller who used to sell security products to TalkTalk. And so it's interesting to know and to kind of hear and see both sides of this. But I wonder, like, what the state of security would be today in TalkTalk had that 2015 attack never happened. And I dare say, I think a lot of businesses will probably have been, over the past few years, been dragged into the modern world a little bit and probably outsourced their capabilities to some kind of managed service provider. But I know that the TalkTalk security team is what I would describe as a pretty mature outfit now, with some very talented people in there. But I dare say they wouldn't be there if it hadn't been for the 2015 attack, myself included. One of the appeals for me was what happened in 2015. That's why I literally wanted to join TalkTalk, to go and actually feel it, smell it, and see what it was all
Yeah.
about on that side of things. So it's a fascinating impact that you've had on the industry, and I think you touched on the media side, and I definitely want to get into that a little bit more. So before we do that, though, just rewind a little bit and talk a bit about your kind of family life and your upbringing and stuff like that, and where this kind of love of computers came from. Was it all gaming and stuff? And maybe tell us, what was your first computer? How did that come about? Was it a gift, something you built? What happened?
So my first computer was like, it was a gaming computer actually. So I used to, my family had this really old computer, and what I would do is I'd go on it for like 2 hours a day and play this like offline game. I can't remember the name of it, but like I was really young back then. You know, I was like 6 or 7. I used to play like this offline game. I think it was like a skateboarding game. You know, like one of those really bad games that you like you'd use the arrow
Tony
keys.
Hawk. Yeah,
Yeah, gotta be,
yeah,
gotta be Tony
Gotta be.
Hawk.
It's got to be. Yeah.
yeah. So that's like where it started. You know, I used to play that a lot. I eventually, like, I think it was for Christmas or my birthday, was bought like a gaming computer, like something, you know, that could play online games and like games which had bigger requirements. So I started like using using that computer to basically just game online. That's all that I would like do. Like I'd actually go as far as saying that gaming has been a bigger part of my life than actually what happened after, like with Talk and everything. Because like I would spend so like my whole life basically centered around this game, like World of Warcraft. Like I used that to like fulfill every single like need that I had. Like I'd socialize through it. I'd like have entertainment. I would do everything through this game.
Was it an addiction?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I don't even like I would don't even have to hesitate when I say like answer that, because you know it was really extreme. And I think that's where like it all started really. If I hadn't been like if I hadn't played that game as much, I honestly don't think I would have been where I am today. Yeah.
Do you think you got an addictive personality?
Um
Like you get
yeah.
into something and you have to know every single thing about it until you've exhausted it and it's no longer of interest, like
So
World of
like
Warcraft
yeah.
was.
It's difficult to say because back then I didn't have anything better to do. Like so my personality traits, I wasn't interested in anything else. I wasn't interested in what normal like kids my age would do back then. Like I wasn't interested in socializing. You know, I just didn't like it. But something like later on in life, I was like diagnosed with Asperger's, right? So like it's a form of autism, and that probably contributed to it. But back then, I didn't know like even what that was. So I think for me, it's just like a set of personality traits that sort of contribute to things. But I don't know. I wouldn't go as far as saying it's like an addictive personality, because I like now I can actually stop. Like I know when to stop and draw the line. Like I've got a lot more balance in my life now, as opposed to like I don't know 10 years ago. So yeah,
That's good. Yeah, that's good. Definitely good to hear.
mm.
Were your parents the same? Were they gamers? Did they indulge in the same
No.
passions?
No, they're like the complete opposite. So, you know, like no, they like at one point they didn't even know how to turn a computer on. Like they don't come from that side of things at all. Like, yeah, like
So I guess it's difficult for them to comprehend when you're talking, you know, even in a legitimate way about communicating with people online and stuff like that. Like,
yeah, well, you
they
know,
probably don't get it right.
they didn't understand the concept of it back then. Like I used to have like a headset on, right? And I'd like talk to like people internationally, like people from Germany, and they just look at me and like they couldn't really grasp that I was speaking to someone in Germany. So like that like principle alone was like really new to them. So they, you know, they would have had no idea or like of like anything that was going to happen and where I turned out to be today. So yeah, they're not familiar with things at all when it comes to computing.
And I guess the world of you know, Llanelli is not used to the global media descending on a teenager's bedroom. for computer-related offences. So when 2015 rolls around, no, actually, I beg your pardon. You mentioned that you were arrested for the college incident. So that happened before TalkTalk, right?
Yeah.
So that's obviously not global media.
No.
That's like local police, I'm assuming, knocking at your
Yeah.
door. What did that feel like, and what was the reaction from your family as well?
Yeah, so like, see, this is something that I get asked all the time because like I offended twice, right? Like I got arrested, I continued to offend, and actually I went on to get involved in the TalkTalk incident. But so for the college arrest, it was, you know, it was nothing in contrast to the second arrest. Like it was just my local police department. They like knocked on my door. You know, I was like sleeping at like 7 in the morning. I remember just opening my eyes to like two police officers standing in my doorway, and like they just, you know, they just told me to get up, and like they arrested me on suspicion of DDoS in the college, right? It was like straightforward with them. Like
Mm.
I, you know, they just, I sat in my living room. They arrested me, and then they just seized all of my devices, took me down to my local police station, and I think I was there for like 2 hours, and I was just released. Like it wasn't as extreme as the second arrest.
how do you think you got caught for that one? Did they tell
Um,
you?
so this is the thing. Like I've never been told. I only have theories. Like I've never
Mhm.
been told how I got caught or anything. But with the college DDoS, so the college, like what I would do is I would DDoS the college at like different times of the day. And once I DDoS the college, I think it was at like 1 a.m. in the morning. Well, I had visited the college website before I had DDoSed the website. And like, so cookies were saved in my browser. So if I visited the web page, I would have automatically been signed on. And if I like navigated in the website, there would have been like web server logs, right? Of me like interacting with the college website. So I think what happened is like one of the sysadmins just looked at the activity around the time of one of the attacks, realized that I was like the one of the only people signed in at like 1 a.m. in the morning. And you know, that pretty much narrowed his like his surface down to like just probably me or like
Mm-hmm.
very few people. So that's my theory anyway.
Yeah, they're probably looking at who's doing reconnaissance and making sure the website is up,
Yeah. Yeah.
or yes, to see the website is down. I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting one though, because you could technically argue to say, well, I left my computer on, like, and the web browser was open, so the session stayed live. Like
Yeah.
it's
Mm.
well, it's I guess it's if you ever went to court, you could probably
Yeah.
argue that case.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's an interesting one. You know, unless you know you conspiracy theory, you think, well, actually the Mirai botnet was just a honeypot to catch people to say, oh, yeah, who's going to accept this? And yeah,
Mm.
Daniel accepted this.
Yeah, like I think the thing is though, that like evidence alone, I think was enough to warrant like issue of an actual search warrant. Because what, so when they searched my, like when they came to my house and took my devices, the evidence was on my computers. Like I didn't wipe anything. It would have all like been there. There would have been like, you know, logs of me accessing the college. There would have been like chat logs. So it was all there for them. So I think all that they needed was that like initial search warrant, and yeah, from there on it would have just been easy for them.
What did it feel like that to know someone was going through all of your devices, kind of forensically, and looking at everything that you've done?
Well, so this is the thing, right? They initially came here to arrest me for the college DDoS, but when they took my devices, there was obviously other material for things that I had like done with people on these forums,
Mm-hmm.
like, and I'd hacked different websites and been associated with all these people. They uncovered all of that once they like seized my devices on suspicion of that college DDoS. So I knew at that point in time, like the next time that I go back to the police station, they're gonna arrest me for like a lot more charges. And that's what happened. But you know, I kind of like expected that once they seized my devices, because I knew, you know, there was no hiding it. Like there was evidence of other offenses on my um computer.
What was your relationship like with your family then at this point then? So when they're going through the process of searching your devices and you know there's more shit on
Mm.
there that you've done, and Like, what was the conversation? I know what conversation my
Yeah.
dad would have with me, but what was it like for you?
No, so like the problem, like my parents didn't really grasp what had just happened. Like they didn't, if you they didn't know what hacking was. They didn't know
Mm,
what DDoSing was. And I think at that point in time they didn't really understand what I had done because they couldn't even like comprehend the concept, right? Like they thought, that I had just done something like this, this is me speculating, but not as like malicious as it was. Perhaps they thought that like I just
it's not like a tangible.
yeah.
You haven't gone and robbed an old
Yeah,
lady, have you?
yeah,
It's
like
like
this
it's
this is the thing, right? Like I was I was a teenager that used to
yeah.
never leave his house. And like in that from their perspective, I was like, I wasn't like I didn't do anything wrong. So
Mm,
like I had a conversation with them, and at first they refused to like buy me like new devices, but I just sort of persuaded them because they also realized that like I had like my so everything was done. Like my whole life existed and resolved around this like computer, right? Like I
mm,
socialized with people, socialized even like some close friends that I had in school. So I had like one or two people that I would speak to. And I'd even spend more time talking to them through a computer than in real life. So so this like removal of my computer basically stripped away like my only existence. As as sad as it sounds, that is the like reality of what it did.
mm.
And I think that probably contributed to them like going out and buying me a new computer.
And this was they so they bought you a new computer after the college incident.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, like a lot obviously a lot of people are like opinionated on that. And, I understand because I'm older now. But it's easy to look at something and speculate and say, well, I would have
Mm.
done this, I would have done that. But you have to like actually try and be in the situation to understand it. Like, because I speak to a lot of people, and what they do is they like apply the logic of someone much older, someone that's much more aware, and that logic wouldn't have applied to me,
Yeah.
and it probably wouldn't have applied to my parents because my mum, she didn't know how to turn the computer on, like until all of this happened. So that's how unaware they were. Like they just didn't know what computer hacking was. So yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? And I guess as a parent, they're just going to try and help you
Yeah.
kind of overcome the situation. And if that is buy you a new computer because that's what your life is all about, then you can totally get it. And as a
Mm.
parent, you know, especially like you said, you haven't gone out and committed some heinous crime against like humanity or anything. You're still like the same son that they've
Yeah.
had for the last like 15 years and stuff.
Yeah.
And it must be a weird concept for them. So
Mm.
fast forward to the second arrest then, and the global
Yeah.
media's on their doorstep, and all of a sudden they're, you know,
Mm.
I dare say a little bit more clued up as to what you do on your computer and stuff. Most 15-year-olds probably do something completely different on a computer on the internet. I'll be honest
Yeah,
with
of course.
you.
Yeah.
And so, what was it like second time round? Describe that experience?
Yeah, so that was like complete mayhem. Like, I was out at like so what I was out with like a family member, and I received a phone call, and it was my dad, and he basically told me that the police were in my house and they were like there to speak to me. But, like at the time of that phone call, I heard like a police officer in the back tell me not to tell my dad not to tell me something. So obviously this police officer was trying to tell my dad not to say that the police were in my house. So like I should make sure I actually came back, right? But I wasn't going to go on the run, I was like I was still this teenager. So
Right.
anyway, I come down my street and like the whole street's like cordoned off. There's like four police vans, loads of undercover like police cars. There's also like marked police cars. And there's like at least I don't know like 20 police officers just everywhere. They're like
Jeez.
all over the front of my house. All the doors are open, and these police officers were like agencies. They weren't local police. They were like I'm wearing like suits, shirts, and it was you could tell that the atmosphere was a lot more
Mm.
serious. So like I walked on my street, and at first they don't recognize me. Like I just walked past them. So I walked into my house, and like, I just walked up. I just walked up to one of them, and I said to them, yeah, I'm Daniel. And then they just looked at me and were like, oh, okay, we're gonna arrest you now. So they arrested me. It was like 5 at night, so it was like in the evening. By this time, they arrested me. They like searched my house, but this search was like a real search of a house. Like they went through everything. They took like every single electronic device that was in the house.
Wow.
Yeah. So they were there for hours, and when it was time to go, they put me in the back of like an undercover police van in between 2 police officers from Scotland Yard. There was like 1 police car in front of us, 1 police car behind us, and like we had this like 2 police car escort all the way through like my local town. Like they skipped red lights, like roundabouts and stuff were closed off. Like it was like an armed, like it was unbelievable. It was like something out of a James Bond film. But yeah, we get to like the local police station in like under 2 minutes. Honestly, it was insane. And I'm like fast tracked through my local police station. So they threw everyone out basically, and they said like, this is a bit of a bigger situation. They like interviewed me, but the interviews were short because they were from like other parts of the UK. So they were from like London. Like a lot of these, like the Metropolitan Police were based in London, and they didn't want to be there all night because they had to get on a train and go all the way back to London. So they interviewed me for like I think it was a few hours, and then they bailed me to a police station in London, and that was pretty much the arrest.
So that means you have to then go to London to answer bail. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. So
that's a pain in the bum.
Yeah, and that lasted 4 years. So this was like a huge financial burden. Like, so train tickets. I live in Llanelli. I have to go to London every single time, right?
Wow.
And so, I'm being bailed like 2 months at a time. So in a year, I'm going back there like, at least like a good few times. And so like a train ticket to go there is like, it adds up, because I was on bail for 4 years to police stations in London. I spent thousands on like just train tickets alone. So yeah, I basically like had to attend these police stations in London. Otherwise, they would have like applied to keep me in prison while being while waiting. Like, yeah.
So rewind slightly. That's I mean, there's so much there we can talk about, but tell us why that was such a big incident then. 2015, the TalkTalk hack. Why was every policeman from London on your doorstep kind of thing? Why was it such a big deal?
It was probably because of like who was involved, right? Like TalkTalk is a huge company. And it's going to sound stupid, but I didn't realize at the time how big they were. Because the like vulnerability was so like trivial to find. I thought they were just this small company. Like, this is the awareness that I had. I didn't realize that they were this big company. So I had done like this huge like thing to TalkTalk, and it was breaking news. Like when it happened, like national television was interrupted, and like it came on under breaking news. And I think like the police were just told like to find like the perpetrators under any circumstances, pretty much, and that's probably what warranted this huge like response.
Yeah. When did you have your oh shit moment, when you realized, oh shit, what have I done?
So there was 2 moments. When I sent I extorted obviously the CEO of TalkTalk, and when I sent like the extortion email, I remember like refreshing like a web page, and I could see like a tab, and it said breaking news, and like it referenced the TalkTalk incident. And then like I went into my living room, I turned on the TV, I turned on BBC, and as all I could see was breaking news, and like the news anchor standing there, and I'm just like in my living room just like looking at the TV, and I'm like, oh, what have I just done? And yeah, that like was the moment where I sort of realized like the gravity of what I had done, pretty much.
So I think the media reported the hack maybe 2 or 3 days before you sent the email.
Um, that's yeah. So it was like a few days, but I I can't. So I think the actual hack was like breaking news when like the same day it happened, or like a day later.
Because they took
But
the website down, didn't they? They took
yeah,
all the front-facing services
yeah,
down.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
But like the extortion didn't come until like 2 or 3 days later, because I think the CEO announced it on like BBC.
Mm.
So that's how that come along.
Did you watch it? Did you watch Dido give the interview then to the media where she
Like
talked about what was it? What was she called it? Fucking sequential injection or something? Whatever
sequel sequel injection. Yeah.
Everyone was mocking her because it was like she kept saying sequential when she meant sequel.
Yeah.
I think like, and I wonder whether that kind of put even more focus on. What did you watch any of that stuff then? What was it like for you?
The problem is like I was either really self-absorbed, or like I just had something wrong with me, because because like most people, right, in that circumstance would react in a certain way, but you all like rationale and like logic just went out of the window. Like I was sitting there and I was looking, and like it was out of body, like it was like an out of body experience. I remember just thinking like, well, what am I supposed to do now? Like I've done
Yeah.
this huge investigation's taking place. It's on national news, and I'm there like I have no idea what to do. I watched a lot of the stuff. So I think the first thing that I watched was the breaking news of the hack, and that's what like made me realize like the significance the most, because like news chat, like all channels were being interrupted, and like yeah, it was mayhem. But yeah.
Were you
Yeah.
watching that thing? Were you watching that, looking at it, thinking like, look what I've done in a positive way? Like, were you feeling good about it, like euphoric, like I've actually done something that's created a lot of buzz, or were you sat there thinking, shit,
No.
the
Yeah.
suits are coming next? Like this is already, which way were you leaning?
I was scared. Like I was honestly really scared, because the thing is, the amount, like I demanded, I think it was £80,000. It's not like what I had done was not like sophisticated and like planned out from this long and like huge attack. It was like very like opportunity based, right? So I just like quickly wrote this email together and pressed send. So it didn't have the same reflection on reality as it had in like the media. And when I watched it, I was honestly just like scared, because I couldn't believe that I had done something like on my computer that was like right next to me, which had just like made national news. So yeah, I was scared more than anything.
So what was your involvement then? Because there was more people than just you
Yeah.
involved in the whole Talk 2015 hack scenario. So what did actually you get charged for? What was your responsibility?
So like initially they charged me with like a lot of things. They charged me with everything. Initially, they charged me with a hack, the blackmail. Like they even talked about charging me with like another 50 offenses because of blackmail offenses, because what I had done is sent out this extortion email to every employee. I'd pulled out like all the emails in this data set, and I just sent this mass email to them all. And initially they ended up charging me with the blackmail to the CEO and not all the people. But I because like a lot I was charged with a lot of offenses because I had done other things as well. Like there was other things on my computer. Like this TalkTalk incident is just one of the things that I've been involved in, right? Like I also like blackmailed other companies and hacked them internationally, like in Australia and stuff. So like my main role in the TalkTalk incident was the blackmail, pretty much.
And was it right? Am I right in thinking then it was the Bitcoin wallet that kind of led the feds to your door? If that's
Yeah, so this is like just a theory once again. Like there's no concrete evidence. They've not told me, but I was like so around the time that TalkTalk happened, I was like extorting a lot of other companies. It wasn't just TalkTalk that I was extorting. And I had a Bitcoin address, and I supplied this Bitcoin address to two different companies, TalkTalk and this smaller company based in the UK. And both of those incidents have been reported to the same authority, the Metropolitan Police. So presumably, all that they did is take that Bitcoin address and cross-reference it with this smaller hack. And they started to realize that they were both linked. But with this smaller hack, like I only used a public VPN. I didn't use Tor or anything. But with TalkTalk, I used Tor. So with TalkTalk, I used Tor, but with this smaller company, I only used a public VPN. And presumably they just went to this VPN provider and they just like handed over my IP address, because obviously there's like data retention laws in the UK, and this VPN provider was based in the UK as well. So, it wasn't sophisticated.
So you mean you were using a VPN and you were using Tor to send the email, like to go onto the mail provider's website to send the email? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
And so the other guys that were arrested then, there was people arrested for like sharing the information of the users or the customers that were part of the breach data set and stuff like that. Were they people that were known to you in these forums and stuff? Do you have a relationship with them? What was the association?
So there's two other people that stand out to me. There was a 21-year-old and another 17-year-old that was arrested in the UK. And initially they tried to like put me with them as co-defendants. They tried to like say that we conspired together, but I'd never heard of these two individuals in my life. Like I didn't even know who they were. And what the police were basically saying is that because we had hacked the same thing, there was conspiracy there, but that doesn't hold up in court because we didn't actually conspire to do anything. So with this blackmail incident, like I pretty much acted on my own, right? Like nobody else sent the email, like I sent the email. But the way I came across the vulnerability was through, so basically I used to monitor this forum. Like I used to be moderator on this like invite only forum. And I was like responsible for like approving applications and like managing like user content. And one user made a thread on this forum that basically shared like a proof of concept in TalkTalk's subdomain, which was vulnerable. And I took that vulnerability, I shared it with someone else. They exploited it, and then they passed me the data. So, like to answer your question, I was like affiliated with someone, but I don't think it was the other two that were arrested. I don't know if that person's actually been caught, but the thing is, like, so many people had access to this vulnerability. Like, it was ridiculous. Like, it was well over 10 people. Like, there were a lot of different arrests made. Like, I think it was also a 15-year-old in Ireland that was arrested.
So
yeah,
knowing all the inside information you have, do you feel like you were hung out to dry? Like they caught you, so it was like, well, we've got someone, game over, we'll charge him, and anyone else we can quickly sweep up, it's fine, but we're not going to spend too much time looking into this now we've got someone.
So, well, this is the thing, right? If you look at the media coverage of everyone else that was like arrested, it's like trivial in contrast to me. Like if you type TalkTalk hack in, I'm the one that comes up, like nobody else. And like I think part of that is because I obviously blackmailed the CEO. Nobody else that was arrested did that. I was the one that sort of took the data, blackmailed the CEO. Like I also had the vulnerability on my computer. So I could have been like pinpointed for a lot more than the other individuals that were arrested. Like, I think some of them got I think someone got a community order. So I think they, in a sense, like, yes, I was pinpointed because from like the authorities' point of view, there's probably like a realistic chance of me going to prison. And that's what, they would probably try and aim for, to act as like a deterrent for the offenders. Yeah.
I guess from a CPS point of view.
Yeah,
got
this
a
is like one of
better
the
chance.
first big arrests for computer hacking, cybercrime in the UK that certainly I can remember. Anyway, I can't think of one
Mm.
that was as public as this. And I guess I wonder whether, I never met Dido, and I don't know her. She wasn't there when I joined TalkTalk, but I imagine she's a very well connected person, given her status as a baroness and stuff like that. So I dare say that there was some influence there to make sure that there was a head on a spike, as it were, for what ultimately I would say cost her role. And made a significant dent in the share price as well to the company that never really recovered. But what's fascinating now is if 2022, if that same vulnerability occurred today, like someone scans the front-facing logon website or what a subdomain of a website and finds a SQL injection bug and exploits it and all the rest of it, yeah, it would probably like warrant a few tweets off some like cybersecurity journalist or whatever, but you wouldn't have global media at someone's bedroom door beaten down.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah,
seem
it's,
to be the same anymore.
Yeah, when you say, like when you put it that way, it is actually really interesting to look at, because there's been bigger hacks like since that, like way bigger hacks, and
Yep.
they've not had the like media coverage that TalkTalk ever had. That's for sure. So yeah,
And
I
they
think you're
happen like
right. Yeah,
almost daily.
yeah, they do.
It's crazy. You look at the
Mm.
Equifax breach, share price is doing fine. You look at there's so many of them, and it's almost a given now that at some stage someone's going to leave a fucking S3 bucket open, and it's going to be rife with full of data and all the rest. You don't even have to hack them anymore.
No.
You just go googling for it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do feel like the media wanted a good old cyber criminal hacker bedroom story there, and you were right for it.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, there's not like, when you think about it, there's not, well, I don't think there's like any logical explanation, because the only other thing that I can think of is like the CEO, right? Like something that I learned since my arrest is that she actually sits on a lot of like government boards. Like she's part of I think the Metropolitan Police is like policing board. Like she runs the test and trace program,
Yep.
like for COVID. So that may have something. Yeah. Yeah, run. So that may have something to do with it. But
yeah, 100%.
yeah.
Like like I said, I don't know her, so I can't speak with
Mm.
any confidence here. But all I can imagine is that she's a very well connected person in in the government. Yeah, it is fascinating, isn't it? And I think that the reality is, though, that a lot of companies, 2015 onwards, all of a sudden started investing in cybersecurity. Big fucking time. TalkTalk, obviously, and they went to town on investment in cybersecurity to give their shareholders the confidence that they needed to kind of get back on track, as it were, quite rightly. But I think it made I think it made a huge dent on the industry. Managed service providers started coming out of the woodwork, being able to, the vendor space just kind of exploded from them. Ashley probably knows this more than anybody. New products to come and solve all of these problems, WAFs and EDR tools and all the rest of it have all kind of come about. I'm not saying it's a direct correlation since 2015 onwards, but, and obviously these are global companies, but like the industry in general seems to have morphed in the past 6 or 7 years, where you have to invest. There's no choice but not to invest, and you can't get away with it anymore. You can outsource it, fair enough. You can tick a few boxes and pass a few audits and PCI DSS certifications, all the rest of it. But you've got to have some level of in-house capability nowadays. There's some kind of like bare minimum standards. But back then it wasn't really the case, and it does seem to be that massive media kind of circus that was around this case really kind of kick-started that, I reckon.
And you think like 2015 wasn't actually that long ago. Like we talk about it being like that far away, but it wasn't actually that long ago. But like Colin is right. I would say after 2015, there was definitely like a a spark, like a fire, just all of a sudden lit in the industry. Whereas before, when people who took cybersecurity seriously were like large multinationals, well, Equifax is different, but you know, you probably were talking your organizations who took risk really seriously, and if there was any sort of like cybersecurity incident, you know, they were hot on it. So I think what TalkTalk did is it brought cybersecurity to the masses. It showed that, oh, okay, my information is actually sat somewhere in a company and someone can access it. So everyone started listening first for a very short amount of time, but everyone started listening, and it brought cybersecurity to people that probably necessarily wouldn't have focused on it.
Yeah, and all of a
as
sudden
much.
people started realizing what data these companies were collecting.
Yeah.
You know, all of a sudden you've got like customers' names and employees. Some of them, you know, data in that data set was employee data, but you know, bank details and all the rest of it, kind of in plain text and things, was just, you know, on Pastebin all of a sudden for people to go and Google.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then don't get me. And also, what's weird is like, you know, what you sent was an extortion email to the chief exec, but like fucking CEOs get that shit all the time. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to DDoS you and blah 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 and give us 50 Bitcoin and all the rest of it. No one goes to the fucking police over it. Do you know what I mean? It's like there was something about this TalkTalk hack, right? This whole TalkTalk issue. I mean, clearly there was you know, wider ramifications from the data being leaked and the information commission is involved and all the rest of it. But it is fascinating how it all came about from a criminal point of view with you. That said, it did, and you know there was, yeah, you sound based on your Darknet interview, you went through the mill, mental health wise, during that kind of process. So talk to us a little bit about that side of things for you. How is it?
Yeah, so like, you know, I was arrested in 2015. I spent 4 years on bail. So, you know, so I was initially charged with like 30 offenses, and they were like, you know, they were charges that like not many courts usually see. You don't see someone that's charged with like computer misuse in the context in which I was charged. So they sent my case to like the Old Bailey, or like the Central Criminal Court, which is like, you know, one of the biggest courts in like the UK. Like they usually deal with terrorists and like high profile cases. So what would happen is like I would spend like, I don't know, a month on police bail. I would go to court. There would be like a legal dispute. I'd be bailed again, and this like pretty much kept happening for 4 years. And a point came where I was being told that the next time that I would go to court, I'd be sentenced. Except I'd go to court and I wouldn't be sentenced. So there'd be like this like other dispute about like, oh, this, you know, there's something wrong with this charge. And so basically I went through the experience of thinking that I was going to be sentenced like 5 times. Like you know, and that is a big experience to go through for anyone, thinking that, you know, you're going to go to court and you may not come home the same day. So it eventually got to a point where like I honestly thought that it was never going to end, because it had been 4 years already, and we was like, there were times where we like were still in the same situation that we had been in for like 10 months prior to the day, for like months at a time. So I could never see like an ending to it. So I just started to get like really depressed. And my life started to like revolve around like these dates. So I wouldn't do anything. Like if you're told in like a month you're going to be sentenced for like something, it becomes very difficult to actually do anything productive with your life up until that point in time for 30 days. So I would I would do nothing all day. Like I would just wait and wait and wait for these dates to happen. I would go there, I would be bailed again. And yeah, like, it just took a toll on my mental health. Like I got really depressed. Like I lost half my body weight, right? So like if you put my name into Google, one of the first images that you see, awful image, awful photo.
They always use the worst ones, don't they? The bastards.
Yeah. So it's like a photo of me, like when I, was initially arrested. I hadn't left the house in like 4 months. I was like really overweight. And part of being on bail, I'd like lost half my body weight, right? So I'd gone down from like I think it was 14 stone to like 7 stone. Like I was emaciated at a point in time. Like it even became like a concern to psychiatrists that I may actually need to be admitted to hospital because I wasn't like eating enough and I was like getting physically ill, not just mentally ill. So 4 years go by, and like that basically causes me to get depressed. And it then becomes like this huge dispute amongst like doctors and psychiatrists. Like I ended up, I think it was seeing like 5 psychiatrists because the police obviously wanted me to go to prison. And then my defense team were like, look, is he really in a position to go to prison? Because, you just have to look at him and like realize how ill he is. So like they had their own doctors. We had our doctors. I had to undergo like loads of assessments. And, the whole thing just went on for like almost 5 years, I think, in total. And eventually I was sentenced. But it was basically that experience of how like being told, you're going to be sentenced, going to court, not being sentenced. Because what a lot of people don't realize as well is every time that I'm going to court, you've got national media there. Like they're following me outside the court and they're like, I'm on live news and stuff. So all of that added pressure was just like unreal. And then the media also went around like all of my family's houses, like extended family. They went everywhere. Like they went to my school, basically everywhere that I had like gone or like lived for like the last 10 years of my life, the media had been to. So all of that pressure just like in the end, I just, wanted it to stop because I didn't see an ending to it. And I think, the sad reality is that if I hadn't got to that point, I may have actually spent another 2 or 3 years on top of the 4 years on police bail. So that was a joke in itself. Like not a lot of people spend, almost half a decade on police bail waiting like these awaiting like sentencing for these charges. So that was another element to my case.
And what was how do you brief your family then to prepare them for that kind of experience of
Mm.
building up to, hey, I'm going to London, I might not
Mm.
come home, and the media are kind of invading their privacy as well. What did they make of it all?
Yeah, so they had the same reaction as me because there's not much you can do in like that situation. Like the only thing that you can do is sit there and bear it. Like you can't just go and tell them not to do it because the media, they're going to do it regardless. And like me going to London and then going to court, well, no matter what they say or do, it's not going to change the circumstance. And it was the same with me. Like nothing's going to change what you do, what happens. So I think it was worse, a lot worse for my family in contrast to me. And I say that because I was the one that went through the experience. So I was the one that went to prison, but they obviously didn't experience it firsthand. So they wouldn't have known what it was like in prison, what was going on in certain areas of my life, because they only had like access to stereotypes, right? Like, you envision prison and you think like the worst of the worst. So in some sense, it would have probably been worse for them than me. And it's been a big part of their lives, like probably a bigger part of their lives than it's been for me. So
Well,
there's
you're
that
their
side.
baby boy, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
there's all of this stuff going on around you. Do you think, have they kind of forgiven you for what happened and what they went through as well?
Yeah,
What's it like now for
yeah.
you?
So my relationship with my family has always been good, and they've always supported me and they've always been there to support me. And I think they're just hoping that like something better comes of the situation that's taking place. Like, currently I'm at the end. Like, well, I like to think that I'm at the end of it all, right? So I'm like looking for employment in cybersecurity. I'm like trying to do legitimate things now. Like I've genuinely turned my life around. So I think the best thing that could happen is for like a positive outcome to come out of this entire situation, even if it does, involve everything that I went through. Because the past is the past. Like you can't, like it is what it is, and no matter what I do today, it's not going to change anything. So yeah.
You posted on Twitter something a few weeks ago now, which I thought was really poignant based on what you've just said. And you said there's a common misconception that a lot of cyber criminals get caught, go to prison, and a government comes along and scoops them up. And you've actually had first experience of this. And when you were arrested in 2015, you were charged with 30 different offences, which involved the somewhat complex exploitation of web app vulnerabilities. And while on bail, you reported numerous web app vulnerabilities in UK government websites, and quickly established a point of contact with the NCSC. While on the phone, you asked whether the NCSC would be able to offer you any opportunity, but they couldn't. You even attempted to get yourself enrolled in the Cyber Challenge incentive offered to school kids, but that didn't work because you didn't fit the criteria. Scotland Yard were obsessed with finding ways to get you in prison rather than deal with the real issue at hand. You've done everything in your power to improve yourself, but nobody seems to care. You're a criminal, and that's how you're just being treated. Not once was intervention offered to you. You were on your own. That was the reality of the situation. You went to prison for 2 years with a 4-year sentence, and you came out 10 months ago. You're on probation, claiming government benefits with no real prospects of a viable future in cybersecurity because you can't even do the most basic things based on restrictions put on you from this SCPO. It's a real tricky one, isn't it? Because there's obviously got to be, there's crime and punishment, but then there is reformation as well, isn't there? And there's got to be an end to that. There's got to be, from the UK government point of view, there's got to be a line in the sand where they say, enough's enough. Dan's done his time now. He's, he learnt his lesson.
Yeah.
He can get on with things. And actually, he's quite knowledgeable in the industry. And I know I mentioned him earlier, I'm not trying to make a big thing out of this, but when there is some degree of comparison with Marcus Hutchins, and he was lauded for saving the fucking internet with WannaCry and all the rest of it. And then, lo and behold, it comes out that actually he was the author of some malware back in the day in his kind of teenage years and stuff. But the guy's earning 6 figures in the industry.
Yeah, of course.
It's not like he's not in the industry. It's not like he can't get a job in the industry. And he's infamous in the industry now. He's not famous for all good things. And there's elements of that in your story here, and I wonder why there's such a difference.
Yeah, there's definitely like an inconsistency. That's for sure, because you can take you can take Marcus, right? Like he initially started off doing illicit things, which is what I did. He ended up selling malware. I think that's what he did. He was involved in the whole WannaCry thing, and then the FBI arrested him. He was charged, and he went to court. But when people think of him, they think of what he's done for the greater good, right? Like everything that he's done in cybersecurity and how he's prevented that attack with WannaCry. But with me, it's a little bit more difficult because people look at me and they think, oh, you're the one that was behind the TalkTalk hack. So there's not that added layer of positivity that he has, that I have. But it's the same origins, right? Like it's the same narrative. Yeah, he didn't blackmail people, but it's still in some context criminality. You're still selling malware. It's still the same people you're associating with. It's still the same narrative. So I think you make a good point.
How do you think you can change people's perception of yourself?
So something that a lot of people don't know is that when I was on police bail for 4 years, I engaged in bug bounty programs and responsible disclosure, and I did this on a daily basis, up until I become very ill. So I've got letters of recommendation from hundreds of different companies. I've got a PDF file that's 300 pages long of just vulnerabilities that I've disclosed in banks, hospitals, even TalkTalk. So after TalkTalk, TalkTalk was hacked, right? I disclosed the vulnerability in their website after the hack. So I'm I think so on OpenBug, there's a bug bounty platform called Open Bug Bounty. I think I've submitted over 6,000 vulnerabilities to it. It's all been non-profit. There's been no financial incentive. I'm on like loads of different Hall of Fames. Like when it comes to bug bounties, I've been extremely prolific in that space. Like, and a lot of people don't realize that. And that's something that's not in the media. So what they see me for is the negative thing, and not that gap that I've had for 4 years where I've truly like turned my life around, because I haven't just like sat there not done anything. Because what happened is I engaged in like a lot of these bug bounty programs, got loads of letters, and that actually like this huge PDF file of like 300 pages of like letters of acknowledgement and like rewards basically contributed to me getting less of a prison sentence. Like the judge actually tried to give me 12 years, but he reduced that sentence by 8 years, basically because of this mitigation and how I had like changed my life and the amount of effort that I had put into like contributing to society. So, if there's no, I think that's the biggest like piece of evidence that I can give in regards to like reforming myself, because there's not much else that I can actually do. Like, because what I did. If I could go back in time and change it, like obviously I would, but I can't do that. And
Yeah, what you're
it's
actually
just,
doing is what you're actually doing now is more sophisticated.
Yeah, a
and
lot more sophisticated.
and
Yeah.
and you're doing it for the right reasons as well.
Mm.
I wonder whether, I mean, your Twitter following has exploded recently, right? I think when I
Mm.
when we first connected, it was maybe a couple of thousand followers, what have you.
Mm.
And you'd recently joined Twitter, and now you're like 10, 11,000 followers. It's exploded. Maybe that's off the back of Darknet. Who knows? But
Yeah.
I think you've all of a sudden you've got this social media presence and power that I think personally is going to really give you a great platform to springboard into the industry again from a positive way. You've got this, yes, you've got a bit of infamy around you, but I think genuinely people are interested in your story and the fact that what you've done to turn things around is a positive contribution. You've not just gone back into the shadows. You've come out and said, you know what? Yeah, it was fucking wrong, but actually, I can help businesses, and I want to stay in this industry, and I want to do more things for good, and keep computers as part of your life, because clearly that's like the way the world operates nowadays. So I think you've got a really powerful platform to build on now. And I guess sharing your story like this is really, really encouraging.
Yeah. So like, the saddest reality for me would be to not be able to be in cybersecurity. Like, the thought of having to go to a different industry or do something else in my life would be extremely sad because of the amount of experience that I've had in this industry, even on the other side of things. And I think I have a different like perspective in regards to things that not a lot of people have in this industry that could translate into like value. And I think it just comes down to like finding my place in the industry and an employer that's willing to like look at me as an investment, because these restrictions on me, they expire in 2026. So there is like an end to it all, but that's in 4 years from now.
It's a long time.
It lasts 4 or 5 years. So if someone's going to employ me, they're going to have to look at it as an investment and not just the principles not just on the principles that apply today. Because today, I don't, it's very difficult for me to bring anything because of these restrictions. So there's that as well.
Are you allowed to talk about your restrictions?
Yeah, I think I've posted some of them on Twitter.
I just refreshed. You're at 13.4 thousand, 13,400. You were 10.7 last night. It's unbelievable. You've got, could you imagine 10 years ago you're sat in your bedroom playing World of Warcraft, whatever, not socializing with anybody and being, isolated. All of a sudden you've got nearly 14,000 people following you who want to listen to you and are paying attention to what you've got to say in your message. You've got your growing influence in the industry all of a sudden. Whether you like it or not, kind of thing. You're going to have a significant voice for people who've got an interest in cybersecurity, for good reasons or bad. So,
yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit, but first on the restrictions. So, what are your restrictions?
So the the document is like 30 pages long, so it actually is genuine. It would be too much to like list them all, but like so the most like the ones that cause the most obstruction are ones which ban me from very basic technology. So like you take work from home, right? Like that's a concept that nearly, every company in cybersecurity uses today. And part of that is connecting to a VPN to connect to their network. I cannot use VPNs. So it becomes very difficult for anyone to employ me in that context, because after speaking to employers, it turns out that like using a VPN to connect to work networks is there because of like governance and like government regulations with privacy. So it like has a purpose for the entire company and not just something that they prefer. So like to employ me with like without having to use like a VPN to access their network, they would have to make like a company-wide update just for me. So that's there's like a lot of systems in place, right, that are there which have like a purpose. And these restrictions make it difficult. So I'm banned from I'm banned from VPNs. I'm banned from virtual private servers. I'm banned from proxies. I have to register every single device that I use before I use it. So like a sysadmin, I couldn't be that. Because if I have to access like commercial devices, well, I technically got to register every single device. That's going to cause a big obstruction.
Headache,
So is it
I'm
all
allowed to use
about
command prompt.
So I'm allowed to use it. Like I'm allowed to use like Linux and stuff. There is certain things that I'm allowed to use, but it's how the other technical elements.
Kali Linux? Fine. VPN?
yeah. That's pretty much it, right? that is it. Like and it's funny that you mention this, because so what they've done, they have basically said that I've got to register every single device that I use. In the definitions of like the devices, they've included two-way radios. So these, you can see where I'm going with this, but these restrictions have like undesired implications on my life. If I was to go to McDonald's and order a coffee, I would be in violation of the restrictions on me, because there's a two-way radio that I have to speak through to the person working in McDonald's. It sounds ridiculous, right? But this is this, like, wow. These are the circumstances that I'm in. Like, to give you an example, 2 weeks ago, so I have a phone, right? And I switched it from pay as you go to contract. And I went into the shop, and like when it came time to like sign everything and sign the contract, the employee put everything on an iPad and just tried giving me this iPad to sign. And I'm there like, yeah, I cannot touch this device. Like, so I had to explain to this employee that like I'm on probation. This is what I did. So like the undesired implications that like come from this, like these restrictions, is way bigger than most people could even like realistically think like of, because there's like there's a lot of gray areas like this. The problem is nobody has a serious crime prevention order on them. Like they typically use them for like drug barons, like people that are like involved in extreme levels of criminality and not computer hackers. I spoke to I spoke to like the agency that's responsible for enforcing this document, and they've actually said like there's 3 people in Wales that have one of these orders, and you're one of them, and the other 2 are terrorists. So what good, like is unbelievable. And
so they put you in the APT bracket. You must be proud.
Yeah, see.
I guess it's like they're trying to give like public confidence that you're not gonna you're not gonna get on a computer and start hacking the planet or whatever. But realistically, you can't even order a McDonald's. So like it has massive inconveniences in your life, which is super crazy. But before we were talking about like your following is exploding, and I did a talk maybe a month ago, and it was to a group of people retraining into the industry, and they were talking about all the most people they see in the industry have like big followings, like they're liked. People stand up and listen to what they've got to say, and then people feel like that's the only way to get ahead in the industry. And I want, like, what? How do you feel? Like, do you feel like you need to make a lot of noise and get people's attention to actually land yourself a career? What do you think?
So, it's something that I've like been advised to do by like a lot of employers is to go down like the whole public speaking route and becoming like a public figure in a sense, where like I give all of these talks and things. But that the difficulty that I've got with it is that that's not me, because you have to take into consideration that I was spending like 14 hours a day in front of a computer at one point, hated social environments. And like even today, right? Like I find it difficult to turn my video on podcasts because I just dislike doing it. Like I find it difficult to be like coherent. And it's such like a big step for me to go from that teenager that I once was with like all of those traits to like standing in front of like on a huge stage or like a panel and having to speak about my life experience and things that I've done wrong and things that I've learned from that process. So part of the reason I'm here today is to experiment with that. Like that's something that I've started doing, right? Like I've started posting on social media, and so in a way it has helped me because so I post on LinkedIn a lot, and like on that platform I get a lot of employers that reach out to me because I make posts like that, and I seem to get a lot more opportunities, or at least a lot more people that contact me because like more people become aware of me, right, by making those types of posts. But like the whole avenue of like public speaking is something that I'm still experimenting with and like becoming an influencer almost, because it's not something that I thought that I would be doing like if you mentioned that like 5 years ago to me, it would be like my biggest nightmare. Like you have to keep in mind, right? Like I DDoSed a college not to give presentations. And yet here I am today doing podcasts and like, so it's a bit, it's a bit like,
the tail wagging the dog, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a real funny one. Is there anyone in the industry then that you kind of look up to, and maybe start to kind of look at their traits and model yourself on then in your newfound kind of infamy?
So like there's not anyone specifically, but I honestly think in my circumstances, if I didn't have these technical restrictions on me, I would probably be a lot more like lower profile. Like I would try and go down the route of being lower profile but extremely technical, because my background is technical. And I wouldn't try to I wouldn't do podcasts. I would just keep doing what I was doing in a technical context, and I would try and like progress down that avenue. But that because that's something that happened like when I first came out of prison. I was like, people used to advise me and they were like, okay, you can try and put this behind you. You don't speak about it and you try to move on. Or you can go public with it. You can like speak on podcasts, you can do articles, and you can try and go down that avenue. And that is like the avenue that I've chosen, because it's extremely difficult to put what I did behind me. Like all that you've got to do is like put my name into Google, and it doesn't. In a way, it almost feels like I'm misleading people. Like it would be difficult. I wouldn't want to get into a situation like an employment situation where I've gotten this job, but they don't actually know like my background and the high profile case that I was involved in. And something that's big for me is like transparency. So this is like the avenue that I've ended up going down, and I don't know if it's I don't know if it's going to pay off, but I definitely think it was one of the better, the more viable options that I had. So yeah.
I think it will pay off for you.
Yeah.
And some of the things that we used to do over at Talk is actually like owning the incident and not trying to hide and shy from it. actually, being upfront and saying these are the things that went wrong and these are the lessons learned, and we've been through the fire and we're coming out the other end like a lot stronger. And I think like you're applying exactly the same logic. Is you understand what you did wrong and you know how to, and you know now how to apply that in a positive light and take those lessons learned and share it with other businesses. So I think you are definitely doing the right thing. So in your like in that same vein, like do you think there's things that organizations should be doing better?
Like it's difficult to say because like so I speak to a lot of like CISOs and CTOs, and when it comes to the industry, that it's a lot more complex because you have like compliance and like GRC that have priorities, and then you have the actual technical guys that have priorities. And from like a business perspective, those priorities never seem to align. Like you have different departments in different companies that have different priorities. So there's never like unified growth in like a technical way. Like, I think there's like if you look at like Log4j, right, like a recent vulnerability, companies are still going on about it like months later, and they will be for years to come. So when it comes to like doing things better, I think it's just about having like the priorities right, and like actually, investing in things that actually matter and making progression that way, as opposed to just being all over the place and not really knowing what you're doing. So yeah.
I guess what's interesting as well for organisations, I mean, many organisations, TalkTalk included, and other similar outfits that are would describe themselves as critical national infrastructure, will obviously threat model the landscape, and you talk about security risk teams and CISOs and stuff like that, wanting to kind of prioritise, and they'll bucket up like where's our threat likely gonna come from? What kind of group of attackers? We'll actually perform some kind of action against our environment, whether it's a nation state actor, whether it's a malicious insider, whether it's a hacktivist, etc. I guess though, without the Daniel Kellys of the world DDoSing websites and sending extortion emails and other people getting involved in exploiting vulnerabilities and phishing and malware and stuff like that, like the industry needs that, right? Because if you don't have bad guys, you don't need the police. So if you don't have hackers, you don't need a blue team, and you don't need a CISO, and you don't need all of that kind of stuff. So it's a funny industry, isn't it?
Well, you could argue that the whole cybersecurity industry exists because of people like me. Like if there wasn't hackers, there'd be no need for security, or not as like there wouldn't be a need for as much as investment in security. So yeah, there's that side of it as well, I guess. Yeah.
Which I guess leads me to the question of like, and I know you posted recently on like Clarity FM that you're there to kind of offer guidance now to both parents of kids who are in similar kind of mindsets that you were, and also to the individuals themselves who are maybe considering going, at the fork in the road where they know they've got some skills and stuff, and maybe thinking about how they use those skills and involved in some forums and things like that. What is the advice that you give people? What would you tell yourself, your former self back then?
So like for me, it was like the overall objective, right? Like I sent an extortion letter to the CEO of TalkTalk because I wanted money. Like there was a financial incentive. But as I've gotten older, I've started to realize that like the objectives that I had in a criminal context can be accomplished in a legal manner. Like you can get a job and you can obtain the same things without all the like paranoia and like noise that comes from criminality. So like I think a lot of people have to, like people that are in my circumstance now have to like really have a bit of awareness and like look objectively at what they're doing. Because if you took me back then and said to me like, why are you doing what you're doing and what are you trying to obtain, it would be difficult for me to answer it in a logical way, because everything that I once wanted can be obtained through legitimate means. So, like, that's the biggest like piece of advice that I give to someone like me. Like, the only circumstances that it doesn't apply in is like circumstances where you're making, a stupid amount of money. Like if you're part of like an APT or like you're a ransomware group and you're turning over millions, yeah, then of course it's not gonna apply to them because it's a whole different mindset. But someone that was once in my position, well, it's slightly different because if they're going around and like extorting people or selling financial data for like a couple of £1,000, it's not logical because you can get what you want legitimately. So that there's like a level of like logic that has to be applied to it, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good conversation.
That's interesting.
I think. What do you think is going to be next for you then? I mean, I know you're looking for stuff in the industry. Do you think you really the reality is you're going to have to wait for these restrictions, or do you think that that there's a place for you to go and earn a good living in the here and now? What's on the horizon?
So, like, I've only been out of prison 10 months. Like, it sounds long, but it hasn't even been a year yet, right? So, I think I'm gonna keep like doing what I'm doing. I'm gonna keep speaking on podcasts. I'm gonna like, try and show the real version of myself. I'm not like the cruel and calculating version that was labeled in the media. And like hopefully an opportunity like arises from it and I'm able to do something in cybersecurity. Like I can't give a definite answer, but I don't want to say like I don't want to say that I've exhausted everything yet because it hasn't even been a year yet and things are still like developing at like an extreme rate. So there's that. Yeah.
What do you think your ideal role is?
So, well, my ideal role is to be on like a red team or like web application, web application security. But
yeah,
there's aspirations and then there's reality, right? Yeah, like look, like the other day, I even looked at like GRC, and it's not exactly something that I want to do.
Don't do
Yeah,
it to
yeah.
yourself. all
unless
our
you like
GR
spreadsheets.
all our GRC followers are like, no.
Yeah,
I'm joking. I'm joking. I love you, boys.
Yeah, but like I'm even exploring things that I don't inherently want to do just to be able to remain in the industry. So there's that aspect of things as well, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. So it's the kind of the maybe final question that we're kind of probe you with here. And you mentioned something earlier about like being APT group and turning over millions. And I thought about this. We thought about this the other day as well. If you didn't get caught, right? You didn't do maybe you did the Dido email. She replied and said, "Here's 80 grand because it's probably 10% of my bonus this year." Like whatever. Like here you go away. None of that happened. You didn't get caught. It blew away. You moved on to the next thing. Where do you think you would be now?
Yes. So, if I didn't get caught, my criminality would have escalated and escalated and kept escalating. And like, I hate to think where I would have actually been because I think if I had gotten caught at like a later stage and my like criminality continued, I'd probably still be in prison. So that's where my criminality was heading. Like, I was associating with like people that were involved like deeper in criminality, and ransomware, for example, would have been something that would have interested me because I was similar principle. Like you're sending extortion emails, and I would have probably been a lot like deeper involved in criminality, and would have been a whole different life, I think, because getting caught for stuff like that in like the UK, it's not exactly the best situation to be in. So yeah.
Yeah, what a thought to kind of end on, I guess. And what I will say is though that you're a fascinating individual. You have a fascinating story, and what's even more fascinating is the fact that you share it so openly. And I think you've clearly got a lot more to offer the industry than what you're infamous for. The world of threat intelligence, the world of offensive security and pen testing and red teaming and all the rest of it, I think is going to be a real good playground for you going forward. And I hope that you find the opportunity that you're looking for. But I guess what remains to be said is thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. And I really look forward to watching how things progress for you.
Yeah, thanks. I really enjoyed this. Yeah.
Mr.
Pierre, give us some final words.
Final words. It's been, I think it has been really interesting to hear your story. And we've always discussed doing something like this. And funny, it sounds really strange, but we actually have Google alerts for when hackers come out of prison.
Yeah. That's InfoSec Real for you. This is what it's all about. The real world of information security. And you've had it here today. So
yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.